in the U.S., people living with disabilities are guaranteed freedoms enjoyed by all Americans through the Disabilities Act of 1990. However, to further guarantee that people with disabilities have equal opportunity to jobs, in 2010, President Barack Obama signed an executive order tasking federal agencies to recruit, hire, and retain more people with disabilities. As a result, the government is now one of the biggest employers of people with disabilities. And this year, President Obama proclaimed the month of October National Disability Employment Awareness Month to recognize the contributions of people living with disabilities to the general economy. And to discuss this the significance of such an initiative is Medi Ssengooba, a Finberg Fellow and disability rights researcher at Human Rights Watch. He joins us via Skype from New York. Mr. Ssengooba, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, too.
If you could first start off by giving me your thoughts on the recognition of the month of October as that for raising awareness about employment for people with disabilities.
I mean, I take it to be a very, very important opening to the world and a very important aspect in terms of letting the world know, or letting Americans know that people with disabilities add a lot of value to the employment sector in the country, but also it makes it clear that despite having numerous laws like the recent regulation the president signed, it also remains a responsibility of the government to cause awareness about employment challenges, about barriers to access to employment, and about the employment environment people with disabilities work in.
Now, I know that in many countries in Africa, the rights of people with disabilities is not as guaranteed or protected, including in the workforce. Tell me, what do you think about such an initiative being adopted by certain governments in African countries? Is it something you foresee?
Actually, it's something which I think is lacking right now. Because when you look at many African countries all through, like Ghana, where I've done some work, to South Africa, to Uganda, they're coming up with a number of laws, both on disability, but also guaranteeing the right to employment for people with disabilities. And the main challenge is that it all remains within the law books and nothing else is done. They don't gazette specific budgets to ensure that all the accommodations they are talking about in the laws are in a way implemented. And so as a result, the laws remain in the statutes, but nothing changes on the ground, and so many people with disabilities still remain unemployed. So an initiative like gazetting a month to cause awareness about the employability and challenges people with disabilities go through in Africa, for me, is a good way forward.
I want to touch also on the report you mentioned. You did a report in Ghana for 1 year called Like a Death Sentence, where you're really highlighting and addressing the issue of mental disabilities in Ghana. It's so disturbing as far as I could see. You noted that out of 2.8 estimated people with mental disabilities, only 3 public psychiatric hospitals and only 12 psychiatric professionals trying to meet those needs. Is this indicative of the lack of importance given to this group, or a lack of resources? To what do you attribute that?
Incidentally, it's not lack of resources, because when you look at other health indicators and how governments, for example, invest in other sectors like HIV/AIDS and causing awareness and investing resources in other health sectors as opposed to mental health sector or psychiatric department, you realize that it's not an issue of resources, but it's an issue to do with priority, stereotypes, fears and myths, thinking that people with mental disabilities are not people that are worthy being invested in, and therefore this remains a sideline sector, not only in Ghana, but also in many other African countries that I've been looking at.
You know, it's so much to do, from what I gather, in terms of not only raising the priorities. In the Ghana case, you said only 1% of the national budget was dedicated to that. But it's also really raising personal awareness, people's awareness about the rights of people with disabilities. What do you see as the vital first steps in any country in Africa to start trying to accommodate the needs of people with disabilities?
I think, first of all, they need to know about disability itself. And by that, more research needs to be done, but also more efforts targeting awareness raising within the communities where people with disabilities live becomes a critical issue. When you go to a country like Ghana, so many people who interviewed were telling us that mental disability or disability broadly is caused by evil spirits, by weird acts done by people who get the disabilities. And so with such a thinking that disability only emerges from the evils, from God being annoyed, and so people try to push a person with a disability away from the community becomes the founding position. And as a result, many of them, for example, when you get a mental condition, instead of looking at a hospital, they are looking at a prayer camp. They are waiting for a miracle to happen other than looking for lesser treatment and access to services within the community. So for me, the starting point is about change of attitudes and change of perceptions.
Okay, but and on that note, Medi, I'm sorry we've run out of time, but thank you for at least scratching the surface on that very important issue. That's Medi Ssengooba, a Finberg Fellow and disability rights researcher at Human Rights Watch. He joined us via Skype from New York. Thanks, Medi.
For more information on any of today's stories, please visit us online at voaafrica.com. You can also visit us on Facebook and befriend us there. The address is www.facebook.com/voainfocus.